assume that the material belongs to you and will not be shown to anyone other than the people in this room. When?
And the vacation in Aruba.
Sure.
Oh, may I have some tea, please?
Vacation in Aruba we talked about, we discussed about his compensation for doing it.
Ah, yes, yes. Well, now that you have a witness. No thanks, Alicia, thank you. Dennis, you have that on tape? Or you promised a vacation in Aruba.
I'm feeling giddy today.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So the next step, and there's no rush on this, but whenever, it's for us a collaborative process, and anything that we choose will be chosen by all of us together. So there are about 5 or 6 stages before you would even expect to see something that was, out there in the world.
Okay. Just so you have an idea of time frames, it's going to be at least 3 or 4 weeks before I'm on my feet again.
Exactly.
So any time after that is fine with me.
Okay.
I would imagine 3 to 4 weeks.
Good.
And yeah, no problem with the releases. Sign them whenever you want to sign them.
Well,
Do whatever it has to
you'll
be.
sign them whenever you're ready. You feel ready to sign
Okay.
them.
4 people searching, or 5, Dennis included, searching to try to understand what this is like. One day you may have an illness, but Stephanie or myself could comparably, have the same illness. And how does one understand, share, develop a sense of what the experience is like of having the illness, of knowing somebody close to you who has the illness, of being cared for in a system, the whole process and feeling of it. And so, in some of like in editing is trying to capture those moments that you feel really succinctly say something. There's things like I remember when I said, if Dr. Glicksman or I were at your bedside in attendance at the last week of your life, what would you like us to say? And you say, do like this, discuss philosophy rather than medicine. Do you remember that statement?
Mm-hmm.
So that had some great meaning for he and I, but something else may have meaning for you, and things like that.
Okay. Keep that up front.
Okay. Well, we also will go over it many times. This process becomes, it's kind of exciting when the first few times, and then it's in fact an endurance test. It's just how long you can stand, going back over the material and making your choices and stuff like that. So you'll be intimately involved with it from many different
I have a huge ego, so I think my interest level will be...
Terrific. We'll need every ounce of your ego. Now, just in terms of what we do now, as I said, we have a fairly tight schedule today. So what we will do something that doesn't damage the process at all.
Okay.
It's not like...
Super. Thank you very much.
Or if something feels uncomfortable.
You lived with it this long.
Dennis, how are you?
Well, I'm pretty much set.
Okay. I'll get out of the way.
Oh, you won't be in this at all.
No, I get to...
Oh, you're off camera, huh?
I'm off camera.
She actually comes in now and then. She likes to prod you into asking me questions and things like that, or well, come in different roles.
How is Dr. Glicksman, by the way?
Oh, fine.
I haven't seen him, and I bumped into him once when I was down in radiation. That was 6 weeks ago, I guess, something like that.
He travels a lot.
Does he? What does he to conferences or...
Yes, he's really internationally known in his field, and so like he'll lecture in as diverse places as Israel or Switzerland and places like that. I think even Japan.
Does he speak the languages, or does he...
I don't think he speaks any language other than English. I'm not certain. Paul Calabrese speaks
Calabrese
Italian
is,
as well as...
Italian?
Yes. And he goes to Italy. I mean, he comparably is an internationally known figure in oncology. But his area is medical oncology, as you know, the chemotherapeutic aspects.
Yeah.
And the other is radiation.
Yeah, we've met with Calabrese a couple of times. And I have never felt more comfortable and more at ease with a doctor than I have felt with Calabrese. He just has a marvelous, marvelous projection. It makes you just feel so good. So if you ever get sick, go see him.
No, one really feels that way. We actually have a support group of 5 physicians, who we take turns taking each other out to dinner. and Arvin Glicksman and Paul Calabrese are in the group. The other two are surgeons. Jim Herndon, who's the head of orthopedics, and Don Gann, who's the head of general surgery, period.
Do you know Wyman over at Roger Williams? Dr. Wyman, Michael Wyman?
He's one of Dr. Calabrese's
Associates.
I probably do, and even though I don't know the name, because I go to a lot of meetings relevant to that. There's a cancer center there that has meetings. In fact, I was just invited to a big meeting in 3 weeks that's taking place at some retreat, but I'm going to be in Washington at the time. But they would all be there because they all attend those meetings.
You are just not concentrating on cancer. You're concentrating on many different types of death-threatening situations, correct?
Yes. Actually, many types of crises. The study that the two of you were in is a study that very specifically looks at life-threatening illness, and it was 3 types: cancer, severe trauma, like somebody who fell down an elevator shaft, was in a motorcycle accident, both of whom they thought would die. And then people who've had heart attacks at very young ages. Like we just interviewed a man who had one at 34, and his heart stopped beating 3 times in different emergency rooms.
Wow.
His father died at 42 of a heart attack. So that's one study. But in addition, Stephanie and I are looking in depth in life crises and looking at cancer being one, mutilative surgery, a woman who had a mastectomy for cancer of the breast and then had a second mastectomy, so both her breasts are gone. A group of women who've had mastectomies, a man who's had the man who in fact had the heart attack, who's in the other study too at 34, and then a young hockey player whose mother committed suicide just when he felt comfortable with his homosexuality.
Oh my God. A heart attack at 34, that's incredible. It's like, I watched Brian's song on TV the other night. That was Brian Piccolo, the Chicago Bear football player who died of cancer at 26. I mean, that's disgusting, you know. It's just, you just ask yourself the question, why? I mean, why somebody who is obviously in the prime of his life, very productive, enjoys living, everything is going for him, and then boom, just like that, it gets pulled off from underneath him.
Have you ever talked to somebody who was adolescent who was dying of cancer?
No.
How
Never.
do you think you'd find the experience?
Eye-opening, I think. I would find it very interesting. 37 at my age is not exactly old, but it isn't young either. I mean, I've got a lot of history behind me, and that's kind of comforting. But to talk to someone who's, I don't know, 14, 15, 16 years old, how does a person that age, without having enjoyed a lot more of life, how does that person deal with it? I mean, it's just going to be heartrending. I think it would tear me up, but I would find it very very interesting.
I think one might learn something. I think it would be something that everybody could learn something about. I was just interviewing a woman yesterday whose husband is dying of cancer, and neither she nor her husband think it's bad. I mean, their opinion was, and somewhat, is that you have to die at some time in your life, and this is it, and as long as the support is around. But she had felt that, she was looking at a lot of the responses of people around her, some of whom she met in the clinic when she went, like you, with her husband, to when he was being radiated or given chemotherapy. He had cancer of the lung. He has cancer of the lung, and was that, for some people, they just couldn't talk. One of the things, like, again, what I remember, Janet, that you had said very poignantly is how you wanted to be in with Ed getting the chemotherapy, but you didn't know whether you could ask. And then how many people are afraid to do some of these things? And this woman's big thing was she felt the reason that a lot of people have difficulties is they aren't educated about how to handle a very real life experience. And that's really what we're all here about, is trying to help each other. And we're all doing, because we're all experiencing life in different ways. The reality is Stephanie and I and Janet could die before you. And I've had a patient in this room who had 3 major heart attacks, who I said that to, that I could die, or his son who was 24 could die before he did. He said only theoretically, and 6 weeks later his son was killed in a car accident.
Oh my God.
So life is not without its ironic twist.
Yeah.
We're going.
Okay. I think, this is going to sound redundant, but, there were so many I think, valuable things that you said the last time we interviewed, both of you, individually. And so I'd like to ask some of the same questions. First is,
Sure.
How do you understand your illness? What do you have? How do you see the prognosis?
I have cancer. There's a high probability that I will die from the cancer. But there's also a strong possibility that I will survive it and go on to live a long, fruitful life. Before the illness, we never really paid that much attention to cancer. I mean, it was something that was out there and other people got it. But now, whenever we see something on TV or an article in a magazine, our attention is immediately riveted on that item of news. And some of the statistics are heartening. Your chances now are 50-50, perhaps even closer to 60-40 with most types of cancer. That 1 out of every 4 people in the United States will get cancer. That to me puts it on the same plane almost as the common cold. And I believe it or not, this might sound a little strange, but there is some comfort from knowing that other people are going to get it too, which is kind of a strange mechanism of the psyche, I guess. If more people are getting it, maybe that means that if so many people are getting it, that there's more investigation going on and there are more opportunities for the professional people, the doctors and the researchers and so forth, to come up with the ultimate cure. I have reconciled myself to the old adage, sometimes the cure is worse than the illness. I've reconciled myself to not being what I used to be, and that there is a price that I have to pay for getting better. I have this overriding feeling, and I think Janet has it too, that ultimately I'm going to be okay. Now, maybe that's part of the struggle for survival. You have to believe that in order to maintain any equilibrium in your life. You have to believe that you're going to get better. But the only way you can really deal with getting better is to talk about what you have and the consequences, the possible consequences of what you have, the implications, the good and the bad, so to speak. And we do that frequently. There are times when I'm scared, or when Janet is scared, or you go through a period of apprehension. It might only be for a moment, it might be for a day, where I know that quite frequently I don't want to talk about it. I just want to be left alone and to deal with myself, within myself, kind of thing. The prognosis is, yeah, there's a chance that I'll get better, but in all probability I won't. And that doesn't bother me. What I think I have learned, one of the things I think I have learned throughout so far during the illness, is that it's much easier for me to deal with the ultimacy, if that's the correct word, the ultimacy of death. You said it earlier. We are all going to die. That is a reality. So it isn't so much the end that is perplexing or causes apprehension. It is the means. If I had my choice, I would die of natural causes. Because I guess you can say cancer is a natural cause. I mean, it is a natural dysfunction. I wouldn't die now if I had my choice, obviously. I mean, there are a lot of things that I would like to do, which are very simple, like work in a garden or something like that. And that is probably one of the things that I find most difficult to deal with, is that I can't do a lot of the things I used to do. Janet has been, I think I said this in one of our earlier conversations, Janet is a great nag. Sometimes it gets to me, but if I didn't have it, I'd probably go stark raving mad.
You get him to work in the garden and things like that?
Do I get him to work in the garden? No, I keep him from working in the garden.
You keep him from working in the garden.
when he's supposed to be resting, when he has pneumonia and 102 temperature.
Are you as optimistic about his prognosis as Ed is? Do you feel in your heart, or each of you have your own, what goes on in your head and your soul, and it's not necessarily a reality. It's how you really think and feel?
Really thought about it a lot lately because, really at this very moment, very heavy on both of our minds is the surgery that he's going in for tomorrow. And 2 weeks ago, he asked Dr. Wyman, his oncologist, what chances do you give me? And he said, well, we'll really know a lot better after the surgery because they're going to go in and they'll explore and, depending on what they find or don't find, he'll really find me, I guess, once and probably be able to give us some odds. So, I've been really, really nervous and anxious the last couple of days. And I think I'm one of those people, I know, I'm one of those people, I think throughout my life I've always prepared for the worst so that I'm pleasantly surprised when the best happens. And I have always been very, very lucky, and the best has always happened. Everything has always turned out all right. We've been extremely lucky, fortunate and lucky the way things go. So deep inside, I've really tried to think about the last couple of days, how do I really feel? And I'm real torn. I don't know if I am just doing what I usually do and preparing for the worst, because I think just gut level, I just don't think anything's going to happen to him. I mean, I can't really imagine that happening. And usually my life has gone that way. The way I really, really imagine it's going to be is what happens. Sometimes it has to be, it's real subconscious, and I won't consciously acknowledge it, but I think that's what's happening. I'm trying to keep from consciously acknowledging that he's going to be okay, just in case he's not okay. I'm going through a lot right now. I can't seem to sort it out.
What is the surgery exactly that's going to happen?
There is a malignant tumor on the muscle, just in the lower part of the abdomen. The location of it and the nature of it is encouraging because it's not attached to any vital organ. The intestine is just below it, and it's not attached to that. So as far as the removal of that, we've gone through a period of radiation. I went through 15 treatments, and that had a significant impact on the size of the tumor. It reduced it to half, perhaps even more, or less, its original, or its maximum size prior to the radiation. So this surgery will be to remove that tumor, what is left of it. That doesn't bother me. I say, great. If you can surgically remove any of the illness, go for it. What bothers me about this particular little piece of surgery is that it's going to involve cutting away the muscle, or a portion of the muscle, and we don't know how much. So hopefully they'll just be able to suture the two ends of the muscle together. The other end, the bad end of that is that if they can't, there'll have to be some mesh material inserted there, and that, in my mind, I think, and this was confirmed by the surgeon, that would prolong the recuperative period. They're also going to go for a second look. The original tumor was located in the intestine, so they're going to extract all of those organs down in there and take a second look, which is good, and it's much better than even the most sophisticated mechanical devices. The CAT scan cannot be as sophisticated or as thorough as the eyeball in this case. So it's to remove a tumor and to do some exploring, some eyeballing while they're down there. And quite coincidentally, I've been experiencing some pain in the area of the original tumor, so I'm really grateful for this opportunity for them to go in and take a look to see if anything else has cropped up in that area.
We had one of those pauses in that.
Sure.
Believe it or not, it was 20 minutes. So,
You're kidding.
One I find a sad thing actually about soap operas, obviously it's the great appeal because they play into them, is that they do poorly the extremes of life. There is this humorous thing called soap now, and all those things are so real that they bring on it. I mean, every conceivable vignette that they have are very real, but the soap operas tend to be saccharine and lose a sense of the complexity of the person. Mm-hmm. They sort of look at a one-dimensional, and soap sort of confronts you with image against image against image, which, with a lack of tenderness around how people feel about it, it's sort of like making a joke out of abortion or homosexuality or cancer. It might allow people to handle the inevitable human situations they find themselves in, but I don't think it helps.
I have to tell you something about soap operas. I mean, I used to watch them all the time in college, and then even when we were in Canada, I didn't work, and I watched soap operas. And one thing that's very, I think, dangerous about soap operas is that if something real happens in your life, like this is happening to us, it almost seems like a soap opera. And you get all involved in it. Sometimes you get very melodramatic. I do. And it's sometimes very hard to understand that this is real, the reality of it. This isn't just a soap opera, and this isn't just going to go away. In fact, a couple of times, well, one time especially, I kind of hit rock bottom, and I said to Ed, "I'm ready for this to be over." Okay, that was kind of an experience, and that was interesting, and I feel like we got on the wrong bus. And we're on the bus. It was when he had to go in the hospital with pneumonia over at Roger Williams, and he was on the oncology ward, and he was in this room with this old man that I think is not doing very well, probably in his final stages. In fact, the way the oncology nurse was talking, and I didn't like it. And it suddenly just everything just overcame, and I said, I feel like we've gotten on the wrong bus, and we're on with all these old people, and yes, it was kind of interesting. Oh, we made the most of this unfortunate experience, and so we've kind of gotten into it and talking to everyone about it, but now, all right, I just stop it. I am ready to get off. That was an interesting experience, but I want it over, and I want us to get back on the right bus and go back with the young people and the healthy people and where we really belong. And I really think that has had some kind of an impact on me, and I can imagine it really would on other people out there that watch soap operas all the time.
Are you taping, Dennis?
Yes.
Okay.
What was your response? I know that, we've discussed that when you heard that Ed had cancer, what was your first response to it psychologically?
I first heard when the doctor called and right after his surgery and said that we knew there was a blockage, and he'd gone in there to find out what it was. And maybe it's because I watched soap operas. I thought, oh, it's probably a tumor. I mean, I really did. And when he said it was a tumor, I was not surprised. And he said, I think it's malignant, and I want to call in a chemotherapist right away to consult. I was not just overwhelmed, and I was not overcome, and I kind of accepted it, and then probably got a little bit melodramatic and did some. It took a long time for it to really hit. I didn't have a bad reaction at all. All I cared about was that he'd gotten it out because it was really emergency surgery. He had been in such tremendous pain, and now looking back on it, realized if that hadn't happened, he probably would have died.
That's key too, I think, in that prior to the first surgery, we had literally gone through a period of adjustment or preparation because I had begun to experience the pain fully 6 months, maybe even 7 months prior to the surgery. I had begun to experience. I knew my body was telling me there's something wrong here, and when we were in Canada, I saw several doctors and tried to get it diagnosed. In fact, the original diagnosis was hyperthyroid, which is so far removed from what it actually was. But that period of time where pain is beneficial. It hurts like hell, but it is beneficial. It gets you set up. And I can remember when Dr. Liffman walked into my room the morning after the surgery, and said, "Guess what? It is malignant." Like Janet, I was not overwhelmed. I was not surprised. I was not shocked. In fact, I felt totally prepared for that bit of news. And almost at the same instant that was coming out of his mouth, those words were being put to me. I was saying, "No problem, we'll overcome."
There was also a difference, though. See, he said there was a malignant tumor. And so it didn't have all those implications of cancer. If he had said it to me on the phone, there was a tumor, it's cancer. He has cancer. That might have had a little bit of a different impact.
Why?
Cancer's a hot word.
Cancer's such a hot word. And it also implies illness, prolonged illness. That's it. He is going to be sick, chronic. But instead, this was an operation. He said it was a tumor. He thinks he got it all. It looked like it was malignant. I don't know. I just wasn't tying in malignancy to cancer, and that there would be some. It would go on from there.
Cancer.
I thought that was it. Okay. He got that malignancy.
Yeah. I think you've hit it. You've hit it very close. Cancer is, the word cancer is more conceptual. When you say cancer, your mind can wander to any number of things. Leukemia, cancer of the bone, your body is riddled with cancer. Cancer lets the imagination roam too much. So when he was very specific and he said, you had a malignant tumor, that isolated it.
Yeah.
You knew that it was just that particular spot, that particular piece of material, and it had been removed. The tumor had been removed. The cancer wasn't removed. The tumor was removed. So that made it very specific and very concise, and it was something that, it's something that you can imagine very clearly in your mind. A tumor.
Yeah.
Not a body full of cancer, a tumor. A point of suggestion. I find it very helpful when the doctors say to me, when they talk to me in very specific terms, when they help me understand and stay away from those buzzwords, those hot words like cancer and prolonged illness. Well, how long is prolonged? To some people, a week is a prolonged. I mean, if you've never been sick a day in your life, if you're laid up in bed for 2 or 3 days, that is a prolonged illness. So when you say, look, Ed, you're probably going to be ill for about 5 years. Now that I can grab onto, and that tells me, that helps me prepare for the next 5 years. You're going to be sick for 5 years, or we're going to make you sick, but you're going to get better. And it's going to take 4,500 rads of radiation. I can deal with those specific terms. I can't deal with prolonged illness, cancer, the long-term prognosis or the short-term prognosis. I think it's very beneficial when they are very, very specific.
Ambiguities are difficult.
Yes, yeah, because your imagination is just going to, we're brought up in a world of soap operas, and your imagination is going to roam if it doesn't have something that it can sink its teeth into.
You know, in the soap opera thing, one of the things, Janet, that you had mentioned that, and that now I maybe even understand it more, is that you said, my God, when I first heard about it, I said, I want to kill myself. And I said, I'll kill myself if he dies. Do you remember mentioning that? Mm-hmm. What, do you think that was a response in a dramatic sense, unthought through, or how do you think you arrived at that? What's influenced your thinking about it and changed your thinking about it? When did that happen? When did you begin to feel that way?
Oh, I felt that immediately. Only because the timing of when it happened, not only because it probably would have happened anyway, but the timing of it, we had just moved here. We were living with my in-laws. I had no one else but Ed. I mean, we were each other's life. And I wasn't working. I had nothing else. That I honestly was at the point, if anything happened to him, why in the world should I go on? I mean, there was really nothing else. And I did also realize, as you know, the weeks and months progressed, that if anything was going to happen to him, a lot of the difference would be made in how settled in I got and got my own life going. And you know, I don't have those kind of thoughts at all now.
Do you feel it is from support, or what do you think's changed your thought from wanting to say, my God, I can't go on without it? Is it, I mean, was it strictly a matter of making more relationships? Is it something that's going on between the two of you? Because I know...
Some of it's what's going on between the two of us. You know, he's had to help me through it and say, you'll be okay if anything happens to me and all that. And also just within myself, getting myself busy and myself involved in my career and
Has the
and
counselor
other
helped
things.
you?
Some. I've seen a counselor has helped some. Haven't seen her that much, so she's helped some with understanding what he's going through, and that I've needed. But that hasn't helped me as far as deciding I will go on with my life or I won't. that's just kind of come from within. And
It might just be a matter of perspective. For the person who is experiencing the illness, who has the cancer, my way of thinking, my opinion is, it's much easier for me to deal with it than it is for Janet. I have only one issue to deal with, life and death. It's that simple. Janet has to deal with my life and my death. She also has to deal with her life after my death. She also has to contend with the quality of the life she is going to provide me for whatever period of time I have left, whether it's 5 years or 50 years. So there's a lot, I think the burden on Janet is much greater than it is on me. If you are a victim of cancer, I think it's imperative that you understand that. Now, that does presume a burden. If you're going to understand that the people around you are probably suffering psychologically or emotionally more than you are, that places a burden on you, because then, well, it doesn't. I mean, you have the choice. You can either accept that responsibility of helping your spouse or your loved ones to deal with it, or you can just say, look, forget it. I got my own problems to deal with. You deal with your set of problems and I'll deal with mine. Which, again, in my opinion, is not the right way to deal with it. I mean, you've got to accept responsibility for one another. You've got to help one another, and you've got to talk to one another. Janet is constantly asking me to put it into words, how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And sometimes I don't want to. But if she didn't ask that, what's the alternative? You sit there with your own thoughts, your own feelings, and they never get out on the table. You've got to examine your thoughts and your feelings. And the only way you can examine them is to talk about them, is to get them out there, because it's like wearing clothes. You can look down. When you're wearing clothes, you only have one dimension, you only have one angle, and that is to look down at your clothes. But if you've got a mirror, now you get a little different perspective, perhaps a better perspective of how you look in that set of clothes. It's the same thing with your thoughts and your feelings. If you keep them inside, you're only going to get one perspective and perhaps formulate an opinion on what you're feeling and what you're thinking. But if you get them out, if you talk about them, it's like standing in front of a mirror. You see your words, you hear them, you hear yourself saying them, so you gain another perspective on it, and you can say either that's honest or dishonest, it's good or bad, but at least you can begin to deal with it. And that, I think, is where spousal support or support from the family is necessary if you're going to deal successfully with a life-threatening illness. I've got to tell somebody how I feel and what I'm thinking. Otherwise, I'll go stark raving mad.
Nothing helps one to understand so much as to be understood.
Absolutely. Good words. Wish I'd done that.
How did it make you feel when Janet said she wanted to kill herself at first hearing about your illness?
Mad. Real mad. I got angry with her. It doesn't make any sense. I can't... You see, it's difficult to understand that emotion because I don't have to worry about suicide. So it's difficult for me to understand what she's going through that prompts her to say that. But I must try to understand that because I know that I want her to go on in the event of my death. I don't want her to commit suicide. Having established that, then that forces me to try and get inside, try to get her to talk about it, perhaps try to persuade her that that's not the best way to go. I know that there's going to be a period of remorse and that, you know, we do depend on each other quite a bit. We have a very strong relationship in that regard. So I can understand perhaps the loss of that relationship might prompt her to want to take some drastic step. But suicide, taking one's life, it's a no-win situation. It accomplishes nothing. In fact, it may rob or deprive other people in her life of some benefit. Having gone through this, maybe 5 years from now she'll be in a situation where she has a friend whose husband or wife has cancer. Janet might be able to contribute something to that person's well-being just in her job, she makes personal contributions to individual people, not just a bottom line number, a profit figure. She deals with people, and I would feel very badly if she took it upon herself to deprive people of the benefit of her background, experience, knowledge, education, whatever. It just isn't fair to me, I guess. It definitely is not fair to her, and it definitely isn't fair to the people that she has come in contact with.
Have you ever talked to anyone who wanted to kill themselves or made a serious attempt?
Yes.
How does that make you feel now when you know that you have an illness that may take you away at a young age when other people may elect to kill themselves at 37? Does it?
It really makes me feel as though the person is stupid. I can't think of any other way to put it. You know, time and patience and a desire to, or a willingness to work at something to improve it, really, to me, are the guts, the mainstay of an individual. No matter how bad things get, they're going to get better. Now, they may not get a lot better, but they're going to get better if you have the patience and you're willing to commit the time and the energy. For people just to say, hell with it, enough is enough. I'm not doing that. I'm not giving up, and damn it, what right do you have to give up? I mean, it really makes me resent that kind of an attitude. In all probability, I'm going to die, and not by choice. So what right do you have to sit there and say, I'm going to end it all? I mean, that's a real cop-out. It's not fair. It's not fair to the people who are living, but who know they're going to die by some means or method over which they have no control.
How is it not fair? Is it like you almost
Because
wish...
you're making my death meaningless. You know, it's almost as though you're making a farce out of it. You take your life out of choice because times got a little bad, or you know, you lost your boyfriend or your girlfriend or something, and here I'm sitting trying to make it when the odds are against me, and that makes me mad.
Yes.
I can't think of any other way to put it. I hope it's coming across succinctly. You just don't have that right. I don't care if it is your life. You don't have that right. Not when other people, myself and other people, are in there pitching. I mean, we're really trying to make it. And we don't have a whole hell of a lot of control over whether we do or not. All we have is hope. And hopefully the support of the people who love us. But just to say arbitrarily that that you're going to take your life because things got a little rough.
Yes.
You know, I snub my nose at you. That's not right. That's not the way things should be. You got to know that there's a lot of good things in life. Maybe it's standing at the rim of the world. Maybe it's smelling a rose. There are a lot of good things in life. And to just out of hand discard all that potential beauty and love and enjoyment because you go through a short period of down, you're depressed, whatever. It just isn't right. Give yourself a chance. You deserve more than that. You're better than that. And that's what I want to say to people who, or in this case, the one particular individual who expressed the desire, not my wife, this was someone else, to take their own life. It's nonsensical.
Is it make it your death meaningless because of the fact that you are saying there's something to live and I value this, and somebody else is saying I don't value what you're struggling to?
That's right.
We would develop a lot of insight for a 17-year-old who's dying of leukemia or something to talk with you and give us insights on how to help people, because you know we're all struggling together. You know, just as you know, all of us, the only way you can ever do good crisis intervention work is that, you know, Ed may be there one day, Janet there, one day Drew there, my first name's Drew, you know, one day Stephanie, and you know, we have to try to understand that experience, and the way we do it is just like we're going after this question of suicide and the anger that you would have towards someone who at 37 would say, I want to check out. It's too painful. Okay. What I was really interested in was trying to get at the essence of what got you angry, and whether when you said the statement that it makes your death meaningless to have someone say they want to kill themselves, is what makes it meaningless that you say you are struggling to smell the flowers, to spend more time with Janet, to see your son grow up, and that someone else is saying the things that you value, I don't value. I opt to take my own life and not smell the flowers, be involved with a lover or a spouse or a child.
Yeah, there is a value collision there, because in my mind, the person who is thinking or contemplating of taking their own life has discarded the very things which to me now are very important and which have a very strong meaning and a very prominent value in my life. And I resent that person for that, because I know that for me anyway, and I feel that this should be true for people in general, that living and loving and giving and taking and smelling and tasting and feeling, those things are probably the most important things that you'll ever, they are the most important things you'll ever experience, because they are you, and they are a sign of life. And for somebody to just say, that's it, it's not important to me anymore, is a contradiction of what I think. Somebody said, I went to work yesterday, and somebody said to me, you really don't have much unless you've got your health. And we used to say that I used to say that all the time, 10 years ago. Hey, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. But that was just a social remark. I mean, it was something you never really gave any significance. But boy, does it have significance now. If you don't have your health, what have you got? You got a house full of furniture, a couple of cars, a kid, and a color TV. So what? They're not going to do you any good when you're dead and buried. So health is a very important thing. Health, life is a very important thing. And to live it, whether you've got a day, a week, a month, or 10 years, to get the most that you can out of that, to me is very important. So when somebody says, that's it, I'm going to end it, they're really colliding with me. And I can't agree. I simply cannot agree that taking one's life is the right way out of anything, is the best way out of anything. It isn't. There's too much to be had.
What I'd like to ask, I really like to, all sorts of questions are coming up in my mind. Why didn't you get depressed, for instance, things like that. But one thing I'd like to is, of just gaining an understanding here at the beginning, what was it like to have the diagnosis made? How did the crisis occur? There you were, as I understand it, a rising executive in a big bank. You set up the offices of the bank in Los Angeles and Toronto?
In Toronto, Canada. Yeah.
Toronto, Canada. And then you came here, optimistic, the world before you. What happened? How did it happen? How would one convey a feeling of, how does a diagnosis of cancer occur in a bright young man's life?
Damn depressing.
What were you doing? How did you end up going to the doctor?
It seems, going back to Toronto, because that's when it first started. I can remember the first sign that something was wrong, but I thought it was kind of like a bug, And it was, when did you come out? You came out at the end of June, didn't you? Mm-hmm. So it was in the first part of June, just a couple of days after I'd gotten to Canada, and I felt a very slight pain in my upper abdomen. And as human beings are wont to do, oh, it's just a bug and I'll be over it in a couple of days. Well, it didn't get over in a couple of days. It persisted, and it gradually got worse, and it got to the point where I was afraid to eat, because as soon as I would swallow a mouthful of food, the pain would increase. You know something's wrong, but at that point in my life, the major purpose, my major reason for being, was to help my employer get this major project, commitment of resources, up and running and profitable. So you tend to minimize the more personal aspects of your life. You've got some ultimate goal here that a lot of people are stretching and reaching for. When the assignment was over, Janet and I, quite frankly, made a very risky decision, and that is that we wanted to stay in this part of the country, and we were willing to take that chance. At that point, so far as we knew, the only thing I had was a hyperthyroid. It turned out I didn't have that at all. So we felt, okay, we felt reasonably comfortable with my physical condition, and we weren't all that concerned, to be quite frank. So we came out here, we didn't have any jobs, no job offers, we just migrated here. We were going around on job interviews. We even started the process for buying a home during this, without any jobs and without the true diagnosis of my illness. And then one Saturday morning, I got up and sat down to have a cup of coffee and a sweet roll and could not eat. The pain was so excruciating, and that's when I decided to check myself into the hospital. So when that news came, you got to understand, we didn't have any jobs. We were in the process of buying a home. We were wondering if we were going to be able to make it out here, the economy being what it was and the job market being so depressed. We really had a lot of things that were heavy on our minds. So this was almost kind of farcical, I guess, because I can honestly remember smiling when Dr. Liffman said, "Guess what? You had a malignant tumor." Ha! What else is new, So it was, believe it or not, it was just kind of humorous. It was kind of farcical, soap opera-ish. I mean, that's what soap operas are made of. One crisis after another.
It almost seemed reductio ad absurdum.
Yeah,
couldn't be more unreal.
Ad nauseum, if you want to. So we just kind of took it in stride and said, okay, we got something else to conquer here. And I guess that is, by and large, that's the way we're looking at this illness, as another challenge, as something else to overcome.
Why do you think you didn't become depressed? I mean, did you become depressed at first? Did Ed become depressed?
No, did not become depressed.
I think that is what he said is really key. He genuinely looked at it and does look at it. It's just one more thing to overcome. I was the one that became depressed. That was just too much. That was the final blow. That's when I said I was ready to check it out, all of it. But he didn't. The only time he really got depressed was with the second tumor.
Yeah, that really hit hard.
I think because Liffman the surgeon had gotten it all out and said, even though they tried to educate us saying, okay, we got it all,
yes,
but this kind of cancer, it most likely will come back. Just the fact they said they got it all, I mean, that's what we were living on. And we just had too much other things to deal with that we couldn't deal with the fact that it might come back. Let's deal with that later kind of thing. And I think I thought a lot more about it than Ed. He really put that aside. And so that when he got this second lump, he completely had himself convinced that it was not, that could not possibly be malignant. It was just part of the original, it was part of the original surgery, the healing process. In fact, it was right near the incision. So he thought it was just an adhesion or something. And he was totally convinced of that, and so it was devastating.
How long was that after the operation that you found out that you had a reoccurrence?
I got to trust her memory on time.
2 months.
So for 2 months you had almost a reprieve. The trials of Job had ended and finally something great had occurred?
And it really was a terrific high because, 6 months, he had been really not well. And suddenly, after the surgery, it took about 2 weeks after he was home to really get his strength back. He never felt better. He felt so
terrific,
good for 6 weeks. I mean, excellent health. Because before he'd gone in just emaciated and completely in tremendous pain. And now he could eat anything, and he was just terrifically healthy. So that, you know, I mean, just those peaks and valleys. We went to such a high, and then we both got these wonderful jobs, and we got our house and everything. Everything fell into place, and then all of a sudden the tumor, another tumor. So definitely, the second tumor was much more devastating than the first one, the initial finding out he had cancer.
Depression is, I don't know if you'd call it depression. I would certainly call it apprehension and pensiveness. Seems to be coming more frequently in my life now. And I don't know why. I probably take a very good guess and say that it's just because now we've got another tumor, and I've gone through some chemotherapy, and I know that it is not a pleasant thing to go through. And knowing that it's beginning to sink in, hey, we're going to be going through this for quite some time, and there's just no guarantee. There's no guarantee that another tumor will not surface. In fact, I'm sitting here right now saying, I think I have another tumor in the area of the original one. It's gotten to that point where now I do expect the worst. When they open me up tomorrow and they take a look inside, they remove the existing tumor and they take a look inside there, and if they come back to me Thursday morning and say, guess what, Ed, we found some more cancer, I will not be surprised, I will not be shocked, I will not be overwhelmed. I'll be very, very sad and very depressed.
Do you think you could ever become so depressed that you would want to kill yourself?
No.
You really
No
think
way.
that is definitely, despite the fact you could become, some people feel, in fact, it's true, is that sometimes depression, if it runs in families, can become so profound that someone
Categorically, absolutely, positively, no way.
even though you can be sad, lament the reoccurrence, you would still have this lust for life.
Absolutely. We went to a wedding on Saturday, and I had been in bed for the better part of 4 weeks prior to that. And I was feeling myself really getting down, and I just couldn't do anything. I didn't have any motivation, didn't really have any desire to do much of anything. I went to the wedding on Saturday, and I had a ball. Laughed, and there were other people, and for a few brief hours felt normal. Still, I had pain. In fact, I had to take some medication while we were at the reception. But I had a ball, and it felt good to get back into people. If you've got cancer, if you've got something that is threatening your life, don't give in. Try to do the things you enjoy. Force yourself. Hopefully you'll have a loving, nagging spouse who will force you to get out there and do those things that keep you in touch with the world. You need it. You need this. Well, I can't say it for everybody, but most people need that sense of social belonging. And you've got to try and maintain some degree, some level of normalcy. I mean, you got enough going against you as it is. I mean, you got cancer,
Yeah.
right? So, God, try to make the most of whatever else is available to you, But we had a ball Saturday, and that really brought me back up. And I'm all set to go.
You said at the beginning when we were talking about how comfortable you felt with Dr. Calabrese. What is it about his manner that made you feel that way? I mean, here's a man who had to be a bearer of bad tidings, and yet you somehow don't see him as
He's
some
soft and
angel
warm
of
and
death.
cuddly. He's just very personable. He doesn't make you feel like a statistic. You have a feeling or a sense that he's not blowing things out of proportion, that he's not trying to present one extreme or the other, that he's trying to keep things in perspective, and I appreciate that. He's trying to be objective about it. He's saying, look, you are Ed LeBlanc, and you have cancer. Forget everybody else in the world who has a name and who has cancer. We're talking about you and you alone. And this is what we're going to do to try and make you better. Now, the downside is this and the upside is this. That he explains in non-hyper terms exactly what's going on, and he will let you know what the state of the art is, what the state of the science is, that they have a pump that they can install that you know, gives off periodic dosages of 5-FU or whatever it is, and you know what's going on in the world of cancer research, and that is very beneficial. You gotta know. You just gotta know what's going on with yourself and with the world around you, because if you don't, your imagination is just going to take over, and you may want to just take your life.
In many ways, you're saying that the person has to get in the world of Ed LeBlanc, not into the world of everybody who has cancer, but in you specifically, uniquely, specially, to understand how it impacts on you and how it impacted on you, Janet.
Yeah.
Well, did people say anything to either of you at the time, now we're getting back to the other stuff we talked about, that made you feel badly?
Oh, yeah. My father. God bless him. When I first came out of the hospital, my father is a very, he's an emotional man, but not on the surface. You never know what he's worrying about and what's bothering him. When I first got out of the hospital, back in March, yeah, after the first surgery, in fact, we had been warned by Dr. Sam Van Dam that people would, that close relatives or people would come up with all manners of stories. You know, oh, I had a friend who had this, this, and this, and they died, or they lived, or whatever. Well, sure enough, my father came home one day, and he was up in his bedroom, and I wanted to talk to him because I sensed, or perhaps he had said something that led me to believe that he was not dealing with this thing in a realistic manner. And sure enough, my father said, look, I've got some friends at work, and they said, well, because you don't have a bag, you're cured. Which is so far removed from anything that is true and real, it was just totally absurd. And I knew what my father was doing. He was trying to find some evidence that I was totally cured and okay, and he would grab at anything. Even a totally irrelevant comment like he got from his workers. And that bothered me. It bothers me when people want to imagine something that isn't real. You got to accept the fact, Dad, that there's a good chance that this thing is going to kill me. But we keep on fighting. And you've got to accept the fact that there's going to be pain, and there's going to be suffering, and there's going to be sickness associated with this thing. So now he's backed up to the point where he doesn't inquire, and according to my mother, it's because he wants to respect my right, I guess, to deal with things, and if I want to bring him up, fine, but he's not going to bring him up. So my father has had the most difficult time dealing with it on a rational level, I think.
Are you his only son?
Yes. Yeah.
What about you, Jenna? Was there anyone who said something to you that made you feel worse?
The first doctor in the hospital. Yeah. The chemotherapist, the surgeon had called in to consult. Well, he just taking me aside outside of the room, it was as though he decided that I didn't understand the impact of this enough, and I wasn't really understanding enough. It was, and that I was just taking it. It was as though he didn't accept the way I was taking it. So either taking it too lightly or wasn't taking it seriously enough or something. But had to call me aside and really give me the downside of all this, all the down possibilities. For God's sakes, he just went through surgery. It was the day after surgery, this really emergency surgery. It was so, you know, it was pretty radical, taking out all those intestines, and, you know, I mean, let's just get him a little bit well and be hopeful about what are the possibilities. But no, just had to bring me aside and say, it's bad, you know. It's really bad. And I said, well, I understand that, and what we do is we hope, you know, the longer that it stays away, that we can go without it coming back, the better chances, right? Well, yes, and you know, the first year is critical, right? And he said, yes, and I said, and then if he can go 4 or 5, that's what's considered. Oh, well, he has about a 30% chance of living through the next 5 years.
You know, we're all statistically what would be in the middle of a lifespan, and yet for some people we're lived much longer. And there's many people who are dead before they're 20, and there's many people who will go on beyond us. But the life is unique, as you know, when you
only got one.
Yes, when one says when you're dealing with Edward LeBlanc, not only are you dealing with an illness, but your life is going to be defined by certain years, and the quality of that will either be framed by fewer or lesser years, but that is your life and your total reality.
I said something in our first conversation a month or so ago that I feel very strongly about, and I'd like to repeat it. And that is that I have no difficulty dealing with the concept of death. Death is inevitable, and you're going to die whether it's at 5, 50, or 105. What is most important is the process of dying. We are all in that state. We are all in the process of dying, either from natural or unnatural causes. But we're going to get there one way or the other. I never realized, and this is going to sound trite perhaps, but I never realized how sweet a teacup rose smells until the last couple of months, until we planted some rose bushes in our front yard. And it isn't because it smells any differently than it did 2 years ago. And it isn't because they've come up with a new hybrid form of teacup rose. It is simply because the process of dying is more important to me now. I guess the opposite side of that is the process of living. Whatever life I have left, the process of that life has got to be what I feel good and best and comfortable with. And to me, smelling roses and puttering in my yard, and we just had my son out here for 2 weeks, that to me is the most important thing, to get the most out of the moment that I possibly can. Not that I am hung up on dying, because I'm not. But I do acknowledge the high probability that I will die before I want to, before I'm ready to, you know. No, that's not right either. I will be ready. When I die, I will be ready to die, because I feel as though I will have gotten a lot out of the years that I have lived. And I've gotten more out of the last 6 months, primarily because of this young lady right here.
There's two statements I've heard that I'd like your feelings on mutually, is that, and they dealt with death, that really have impressed me. One, Jean-Paul Sartre is reputed as have saying that death enters life only to define it. Another is that in an Andy Warhol movie, the movie about Frankenstein, they're creating the Frankenstein monster, and ostensibly the way the monster's going to come alive is somebody's going to have intercourse with this monster, and then the statement is made, you have to fuck death to know life. What do you think of those statements? They've always sort of, and somehow, they're playing with, one has to, at least in my head always, has been a confrontation with death at some level.
Yeah.
Allows you to know life, even though in that Warhol movie it seems so extreme, yet somehow that seemed, so philosophically poignant. They're against this great, almost macabre and ridiculous movie, three-dimensional movie. You might have seen it.
It is true. Everyone says, the counselor and everyone, and I know it's true, and sometimes I really resent it. The fact that this is going to make you a more appreciative person. Experiencing all this, you're going to appreciate life more, you're going to be a stronger person, all these things. And it's true. And now in that context, it's really true. It's just that sometimes I really feel resentful of that. Thanks, but then I don't want to appreciate life that much. I'll just go along as I was, if given a choice.
Do you think you ever would have appreciated life as much if you just, what you're really saying is very poignant. Many people, I've seen them, as friends or patients who reach 70 years old and never really have smelled a rose. They just assumed that they could always do that tomorrow, so one never looked at it.
We did before, I think.
Well, but what we enjoyed was more aesthetic, was more spiritual. There's a spiritual nature even to the most tangible of items. There is an aesthetic, spiritual value to a rose, even though it is a tangible item. And before we would appreciate the superficial beauty of a rose. Ah, look at the rose on that bush. But we would never walk up to the bush and smell the rose. And that perhaps is the difference. We would stand back from something and appreciate it. But now we actually walk up to it and touch it, smell it, get as close to it as we possibly can. Something I want to say about getting back to the Warhol thing here. This is my second time around with death. I was in the service and spent 2 years in Vietnam. So, if I may quote you, I fucked with death more than once. And that perhaps has helped me deal with this. I'm not qualified to say better than the average bear, but I kind of think, I sense that maybe I am dealing with it better than some people are. And that's only because people, doctors and professional people, and your secretary just a few minutes ago said how good my attitude was and how well I was dealing with it. So from that, I assume that I'm dealing with it pretty well. You know, just imagine yourself 150 miles an hour, and there's a wall coming up, and you manage to miss that wall by 2 inches. Imagine the exhilarating feeling you have when you step out of that car after you've stopped it. Mm-hmm. Whoa, look what I did. I came that close to ending it all. Mm-hmm. But here I am, folks, alive, whole, in one piece. There is an exhilaration to having flirted to come so close to death as to be bleeding from an exterior source. Somebody shot me, but I'll go to hell, I'm still alive. You know, something injected this cancer, but I'm still here, you haven't got me yet. There is an exhilaration to that. There is a challenge to be able to overcome the most inevitable of all man's experiences, even for just a moment, to overcome that ultimate end, death. You're the champ, and you're on top, and you're winning, and you're still in there, you're still pitching, you're still fighting. There is a certain amount of ego satisfaction that I get from that, knowing that I'm not down and out yet.
Ed, have you become more sensuous, you know, knowing that? Because what you're talking about in smelling the roses is that you sort of admired them as sort of a physical beauty ideal. But now, you know, you're talking about getting near them, they smell more. It's, in many ways, it's like the mother who appreciates the child who's almost been killed in a car accident or who went through a very serious illness. You know, what you're really talking about is you're becoming more aware of the physicality of the world around you as well as your own physicality, as if almost the confrontation with death makes you more aware at a core, gut, human, emotional level of your being, as opposed in an intellectual ideal that's a banker going to build banks. Suddenly, you're a human being that can appreciate a lover, the sensuality of flowers, and things like that. Your son. I mean, how you said when he came up. Do you remember you talked to me? He was going to come up just after we walked. And you said you're going to give that kid anything he wants. You know, he should just ask. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. And he did, too. Strange thing about that, too, is that a bit on the maudlin side, the thought crossed my mind a couple of times that maybe this will be the last time I'll ever see my son. And that depressed me a little bit. Getting back to the sensuousness for just a moment, my sex drive has increased. That is, my desire, my appreciation of it has increased. Now, my ability to perform has been a bit impaired, but, and Janet, well, you tell him the way I've been behaving and the things I've been saying in the last couple of months, because there has been a marked change.
Well, I mean, he's focused more on me and been much more appreciative of me and loving towards me. And of course, but he always was, but even more. And I love and appreciate it. But I told him, and I have said a couple of times, it's kind of made me sad because he has, for the last better part of 6 weeks, not 4 weeks, he's been in bed. He's hardly been into work, maybe 2 days in that time. No contact with anybody else, no work, nothing to really, and I've been the center of his attention. I've been the only thing really in his life, and it's almost made me kind of sad that a couple of times that he's so amorous and so loving, because I think he doesn't have anything else right now. And gosh, you know. Now, though, that he's getting better, and just even in the last 4 or 5 days, when he's been like that, it's wonderful. It's much more, because I know it's not just because I'm the only thing he has, and I'm the only thing around, and he, you know.
But you know what I mean, what you say is interesting, and how I could see how a person might feel that way if, in fact, one is all alone with someone, there's no one else, one would say, well, I'm the most important person in your world because I define your world, your universe is one. But at the same time, what Ed had already said is somehow that confrontation with death is so exhilarating that there's an asseveration of life. I mean, it gets back to that quote by Sartre, or the thing from that horrible movie of Frankenstein, about Frankenstein, but that somehow a confrontation with death allows you to savor life, the texture of it, in that might even be why we have such preoccupation with death, or people do risk-taking ventures. I mean, that somehow it's almost adaptive to make you asseverate life more. Yes. That an ironic thing in people's interest in death might in some way be an asseveration of the quality and texture of life.
I think we're all, as people, we're all confronted with the act of with dying. We know that's going to happen. But there seems to be we accept the inevitability of death, but what we don't accept is that it's going to happen to me. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But people have, I think, people have this weird sense of immortality, that they are never going to die. Crazy inscriptions on gravestones, wills, strange things that you want people to do. On your deathbed, you'll say, Janet, promise me you will do this. You know, what burden does Janet have to fulfill a promise of somebody who's dying? I mean, that's absurd. But that person who's dying has got to know that even in death, they will go on. And that to me is strange. When you're dead, you're dead. Let it go, you know? Have your peace. That reminds me, that word peace makes me think of priest. Something else has happened to me. I am not actively religious. I don't go to church. But I have a very strong sense of religion. And I've talked to a priest, Ray Kiyu. I'm Catholic by upbringing. And there has been a heightened sense of God, deity, over the last 3 months. It's not so much that I want to actively engage in a form of religion. It is that I want to actively engage my peace. I want to make peace with my world and with my God. If in fact there is a God, and I still ask that question, you know. That has become very important to me. And the priest is coming, Ray Kiyu, the priest is coming by, at my request, is coming by tonight. Because I have the strange sense that I may not make it through the operation. Don't ask me why. I mean, maybe that's a soap opera, you know. But there is that little thing, you know, back there saying, you might not make it. And I have to acknowledge that. I have to be prepared for that.
Why do you think you're more interested in God now? Do you see God as a form? Is it God the Father, God love?
Maybe conscience is a better word for God. I don't know. I am suddenly more aware of the sins that I have committed. You know, the sins according to the edicts of the church in which I was brought up. I am suddenly more aware of those. And there are some which in my normal life, my pre-cancer life, I said, you know, you really shouldn't have done that, Ed. But it was no big thing. I managed to rationalize it away. But now it's become more, those sins have attained more of a conscious level. I did some rotten things in my life, and some things that I'm not proud of, and some things that I am really sorry for having done. And I want somebody to know about it. I want that priest to say, Ed, it's okay. And he did. I said, Father, I want confession. He says, We've been talking for an hour. You have confessed. I didn't cite any specific sins. I just vented my remorse and my guilt and my shame for having done some of the things that I've done throughout my life. So maybe it's more a heightened state of consciousness of those things that, according to my values, were not exactly proper. That has made me want to kind of feel pure or cleansed. It goes along with the heightened sense of world, of rose, of son, of wife, of taking whatever I can get and enjoying it to its ultimate extreme. That goes also for the aesthetic, the spiritual side of me. We all have a spiritual side. I think it's just another extension of that heightened awareness, the need to feel and to think and to sense as much as I can, as quickly as I can.
It's unfinished business, as if you
Yeah,
put your...
good word. There's a glob back here, huh? It's got to be processed. I mean, it's got to be spit out and then examined and said, boy, that was rotten, or geez, that was terrific. But it's got to get out there, and I've got to take a look at it one more time.
It reminds me of something a friend of mine had said at her father's deathbed. Had said something like you were saying, and he said it doesn't matter anymore.
But it does.
Does it?
Yeah. I got to go to my grave knowing I'm okay. Got to feel good about myself. And perhaps that's the thing that keeps me going, is I got to feel good about Ed LeBlanc. Got to know that I did the best I could. Somebody did a follow.
Well, I guess that'll have to do. Yeah. I'm fine.
You're okay.
I'm all set.
Tell us when you want us to.
Anytime.
Okay. This is always so. It's sort of like a stage beginning.
Getting into it, yeah.
Start.
We haven't seen each other since the time I saw you in your hospital room, and you hadn't, I think, even the results of what had happened at the time yet. We didn't talk about it, I know. So I don't know any more than since that day. What's happened? And
few interesting things, not only physically but emotionally, and I think as we get on with the conversation today, I think some of our mental processes, thoughts, attitudes have taken a few twists. Physically, the day after our last get-together, went into the hospital and had surgery to remove the second tumor in the abdominal wall, and that was successful. The radiation had shrunk it to a decent size, and the muscle, about a third of the muscle was removed, and a mesh put in its place. And while they were removing that tumor, the doctors like to use the phrase a second look. They took the opportunity to look around the intestines and some of the organs, and they found, the surgeon found a nodule, a very small piece of cancer on the outer intestinal wall, so we removed that as well. The surgery was successful insofar as removing what cancer was in evidence, and the recuperative time was much better, I think, wasn't it, than the first one? In the first?
I don't know.
It's in terms of what I went through in the hospital the second time, it was much easier. Yeah, little things like, you know, the tube coming out, that was removed the day after.
Pneumonia.
Yeah, 2 days after the surgery, no pneumonia. So I recuperated fairly well in the hospital. Did not attain my previous weight, and shortly after I got home we're going through something now with abdominal pain. I have some abdominal pain that cannot be explained yet, so we're going to be getting into some tests to find out what's going on since the second operation. There is something that my oncologist cannot define without going through some tests, so we'll be getting into that shortly. But physically, doing okay. Not as good as after the first surgery, but as well as can be expected, I think.
what does the difference in not as good mean?
The abdominal, the pain in the abdominal area
It's greater than it was originally.
is greater than it was. My weight has not come back up to what it was, to what I attained after the first piece of surgery.
What did you weigh the first time? Or what was your usual weight prior to the illness?
About 130.
And how much do you weigh now?
Right now I weigh about 118. And actually went down to 115 a couple of days ago. But we spent a nice weekend with some friends and had some good dinners out on the town, so that kind of helped out a bit. So the weight is not a problem. It's a concern, but not a problem. And food seems to not do too well with me right now. So, but everything will fall into place. I know eventually. It's just a matter of being patient enough to seek the cure that is going to make me feel better.
What is going on in your own head? Do you feel personally right now comfortable? Do you have find yourself doubting, afraid, any more depressed than you were earlier?
Yeah, the abdominal pain has caused me some concern, and the fact that I have not recuperated as well as I did after the first surgery. There have been some times when I've been depressed and have just wanted to have actually wished that there was no more pain and that there was nothing else to worry about. And it's gotten to me a couple of times, and I just sometimes I just want it to be over. But then you snap right back and you say, "Hey, you got to pay the price. You've got to pay for that cure." And sometimes you have to go through a little pain to pay for the cure. And I am concerned that that they might find something else when we get into the tests for this abdominal pain. That worries me. But I hope that if they do find anything, that it's treatable, as it has been so far.
When you say you wish that it were over, do you mean that you wish that it were 15 years from now and you were all okay, or is that a depressive statement in which you just wish you were dead and didn't have to worry about it?
There have been a couple of times when I just wish that I could die and just end it. And I didn't think I would ever be like that. But the last couple of months, well, I guess about the last 4 weeks or so have been particularly discouraging. I had hoped to be back to work the 1st of November. And then I'd hoped to be back to work the middle of November, and I don't know, when I'll be going back to work. I don't know that I can go back to work. I have this strange commitment to being able to give 100%, or 120% if I'm called on to do so. And until I know I can give at least 100%, I don't want to put my employer and the people who would count on me in the position of not being able to rely on me. Because at this point in time, I can't promise them that I'll be all right. I can't say, "Hey, I'm fine and I'm ready to dig in there and get the job done." It's getting more difficult, to answer the second part of your question, it's getting more difficult to look 15 years down the road and say everything's okay. The future is defined in much narrower terms now. I just almost jokingly I say, well, I'm alive for another 6 months, but I sometimes feel there might be some truth to that. So I'm beginning to doubt and beginning to get discouraged a little bit.
Does it surprise you that you really thought like maybe that you wish you were dead? Because remember one time when I first interviewed you, you said, you couldn't imagine yourself ever thinking like that, and yet, one of the big things of a life crisis is in fact that we find that suddenly we think ways we never thought we'd think before, and then it's like both thinking one is may wish they were dead, in addition the strains it places on a marriage which you might not anticipate.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that that I've had those thoughts. Was it about 2 weeks ago? I had a kidney stone. Now, a kidney stone under any other circumstances would be no big deal. But I've had 2 kidney stones. The first one, well, the doctors say that for a man, the pain of passing a kidney stone is the closest a man will ever come to experiencing the pain during that a woman experiences giving birth. They can keep that job. I want no part of that. Janet was taking me to the hospital, and I was lying in the back seat. And the pain, the kidney stone, the theory is that the kidney stone came about, probably came about because of the treatment, the chemotherapy. The treatment, the drugs that I'm on tend to dehydrate you a little bit. Not only that, but the abdominal pain has kept me from eating. And one of the drugs, the 5-FU, makes me feel, for about 24 hours, makes me feel really down. And it takes me 24 hours to get back. So the kidney stone came about as indirectly from the cancer. When Janet was taking me to the hospital, I would just as soon have died than go through what I was going through at that point. And that thought, as you pointed out 6 weeks ago, was not in my repertoire. It just wasn't there. I don't know what to say, except that the couple of times that I have had that thought or feeling, you just got to reach down inside of yourself and say, hey, that's not the way to go. There is a reason for continuing. There is a reason to be positive and up. And I have this feeling inside that it's intuitive, instinctive, that if my mind gives up, if I lose the attitude and I lose the positive force, whatever it is inside, that'll be the time for me to go, and I don't want to lose that. But sometimes you just can't help it. Sometimes it just gets so discouraging and so painful and so depressing that you just, for a few brief moments, you just want to hang it up.
Do you feel that there ever could be such a pain so great that you'd actually want to kill yourself?
I still don't think so. When I was lying in the back seat, passing that kidney stone, that would have been a pain where I think that thought would have come to take my own life. But taking my own life did not enter my mind even at that point. I cannot see that. I may wish momentarily that it were over, that I were dead, but I still can't see myself even thinking of taking my own life. I can't see that. But God knows I didn't think that I would have the thought that I have had, so I don't know. No, I'm not quite as sure that I will never have that thought.
One of the things that, is another part of having an illness like you have it really
stresses a marriage in ways people don't imagine at all. And, you know, all sorts of things go on that are not anticipated. And, you know, and have the two of you found that there has been any greater stress? Do you find yourself being more sharp with each other, less patient, or fault finding, you know, different?
We've always been that way with each other. I don't know.
Janet, surprisingly, has become more patient. I'll let her talk about that. She seems to be getting a little bit stronger and a little more accepting. On the other hand, I seem to be getting shorter. My patience seems to be wearing a little bit thin. That might be attributed, though, to the fact that I'm staying home by myself. The only thing I have is Jimmy, our English sheepdog. It's funny you should bring that up, because we were talking about this, Janet and I were talking about this over the weekend. It's gotten to the point now where I've become so accustomed to being alone that when she comes home from work at night, it takes me about 30 minutes to change gears. Having been alone, quiet, not talking to anyone except myself, another person suddenly comes into the room and has all kinds of things they want to talk about, and you have to make that mental shift. And sometimes I know, sometimes I'm a little rough on her, a little short with her, but she seems to be handling it a lot better than, she seems to be getting better as we go along.
How do you feel?
Sorry, I'm answering for you, David.
No, that's okay. I am getting stronger and more patient. I really see that every time something happens. It's funny, I have mixed feelings about how I'm getting stronger, because when something new happens, there's a setback of some kind. If I handle it more rationally and don't get as upset and as emotional, on one hand I'm proud of myself, and on the other hand I'm afraid that I'm starting to get cold and unfeeling about it. It scares me. But I don't think that's it. I think it's just that I'm getting stronger. This past weekend we went to Philadelphia to visit some friends, and it's when he passed another kidney stone, and they'd never done that, or they'd never seen anyone do that. So that seeing him in such pain, and the wife told me the next day that she was just so amazed at how well I'd handled the situation, how calm I was, and I told her that was the best compliment anyone could ever pay me, because that's what I've been striving for, and it was natural. I mean, it was natural. But I have become more patient too, and sure, it puts strains on a relationship. I get down a lot. I'm depressed a lot more than I ever used to be, I think. And sometimes I get real bitter. I'm just so tired of waking up every day with that threat of my husband probably going to die over my head. And I get real resentful, real bitter sometimes, thinking, why us, and why can't it just go away for a while? But he's just always in pain. That's really hard to sit and watch all the time. And that's why I've gotten more patience, definitely, with him, and become calmer with him, because in our relationship pre-cancer, the little things could get on my nerves, then I'd be bored, and I wanted to do something. I was bored with our relationship, and I wanted to go somewhere or do something, and like normal people are now. But now I'm just every minute just so grateful that he is alive and he's here with me, that, that's all so petty and so small and so trivial. I don't even think about. I'm never bored. And I'm never antsy about our relationship or anything.
Did the two of you ever cry together around this? Do tears come to your eyes? And
A couple of times.
Me a lot.
Yeah, it almost seems as though Janet went through a period there where she cried a lot. And I found myself in a role of trying to make her feel better, trying to get her up. And believe it or not, that there was actually sustenance for me.
That helped you.
Yeah, my trying to help her, because I know it's very difficult for her. It's very difficult. She understands the word pain. She knows what the meaning is, but she can't experience the pain. She can't experience what thoughts I have. She's in a very gray area. It's almost like a limbo. Comprehending but not experiencing is a very difficult, frustrating process for a human to go through. So my trying to help her over that, get her through that process, actually did a lot for me. I find now that I'm finding that as she gets stronger, I'm getting a little weaker. And I don't mean that in a physical sense. I mean it from an emotional, perhaps psychological definition. She's coping more, and I seem to be coping a little bit less. Like I went in for the second surgery. I said, okay, new beginning. And then this abdominal pain starts. And then 1 kidney stone, and then 2 kidney stones. It just seems that every time we get ourselves up for a fresh, positive, new start, something comes along and just hits us over the head. And like Janet said, you just wonder, when is it going to end? When's it going to stop? Maybe it's not. And that's the first time, or one of the few times, that I've said, maybe it's not.
One thing struck me as you were talking, you're both very nice-looking people, and you had a sense of triste across your face, which wasn't there the other times when we talked. Before you actually said that, that it's getting rougher, but, your face looked very different, and I was seeing a young woman today who gets herself in all sorts of sort of somewhat masochistic relationships with men who she finds very attractive in a sexual sense, but she says there's always the hope when she sees them depressed for a moment that she's going to be able to change them. Has the fact that you've been feeling more depressed or more the transience of life drawn the two of you closer together in any ways that you may not have been had you not had the illness? In some ways that you're finding out things about each other that if you were more defended, less threatened, that you might not have, because in some ways you're saying the balance in your marriage is changing a little bit in a way that many people talk is the classical thing that in fact this woman talked about. She says she's not even certain she wants to marry because a man can be in control, and she always feels she's the one who's sacrificing, whereas in this particular situation, in some ways, you're almost saying that Janet is in more control than you may be.
You want me to take that one? I've noticed something. She seems to be growing stronger. We've already made that point. Sexually, because of the surgery and everything else going on, our sex life, that is the actual sex act, has not been as frequent as it was in the past. But what we seem to be doing more, what I seem to be doing more of, and getting a lot of satisfaction from, is holding, cuddling, stroking her hair. And I seem to want to touch her a lot more than pre-cancer when we go to bed. I'll just be lying there and have a sudden urge to just feel her, just to touch her. I cuddle up to her a lot more than I used to. and I'll just reach, I'll roll over on my side and just touch her with my hand, just the lightest little touch. And there's a fulfillment there that I didn't experience because it wasn't a need. I could express myself more sexually, physically, in terms of performance, pre-cancer. And it's almost as though there is some amount of sexual gratification involved in just the act of cuddling, touching, hugging. And there also seems to be a deeper sense of love. It's not as cosmetic or superficial as it was pre-cancer. As an example, pre-cancer, when she had her makeup on, I thought she was prettier with her makeup on than with it off. Now it doesn't seem to make any difference. I find her just as attractive with her makeup on without any makeup as I do with makeup. I seem to be experiencing a deeper sense of love, if you want to use the word spiritual. That I think that would fit. There seems to be a closeness there, a spiritual closeness that was not there pre-cancer.
Do you feel more sensuous? You know, last time you used that beautiful image of, smelling the roses more, and, that you were doing this actually more. In many ways, you are savoring the nuances of a relationship. It's sort of like, not like, ram, bang, bump, poke, get out of the sack or something, but it really is like trying to understand or communicate with each other in a way other than in a conventional sexual manner, but in touching, feeling, trying to understand each other in other ways, feeling the tension in one's body or lack of it.
I don't think so. Our relationship has always been very high highs and very low lows. You try to answer that. I can't. I can't seem to put any words to it.
Yeah, I don't think so. To answer you, no. We've just always been very emotional with each other, anyway, and I don't think it's done anything necessarily more to draw us together, and maybe we're unusual in that aspect. The only thing I can think of is I've become much more protective of him.
Yeah, her nagging is getting worse.
But a lot of that is just scared to leave him because I'm afraid of what might happen when I'm gone, while I'm gone. And of him, just wanting to pamper and protect him. But that's all I can think of, really. I don't know.
Yeah, no difference, or not a significant difference, let's put it that way.
Shannon, what about, the power dynamics? I'm sort of interested in the relationship. Ed was a banker. He fired. We were talking before about setting up this branch of the bank in Toronto, and his work in Los Angeles and stuff like that is setting up branches of banks. And now there is this change in a power balance, and in a very dramatic sense at a very young time in your marriage. How do you feel about that? Is it ambivalent? Would you like it the way it was? Is there some ways in which you feel that the relationship is more equalized in any way, or?
No, that is one aspect that I don't like. The fact that he hasn't been to work now in several months, and I go to work every day, and I sometimes feel very guilty that I have this outside work, interest, fulfillment, whatever. And it used to be, when he had his own work, he was not more interested in mine. I think he's still interested, but more willing to talk about it. And he was always there for me to ask his opinion and get his advice. And now I much more feel like, more often I feel like he just doesn't really want to talk about what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on and why.
You used the word power, and I got to say, yes, there has been a shift, and maybe that has bothered me subconsciously. Maybe that's why I have, when she's come home and wanted to talk about something that happened at work, maybe that's why I seemed less attentive or less willing to talk about it. Her job is much more important now than it would be if I were working and everything was normal. And okay, she has gotten a little bit more aggressive, I think. I see it. A little more aggressive, a little more willing to stick her chin out and ask for the raise, almost demanding the raise. She's tooting her horn a little bit more at work. I think she has become more professional, more, I don't want to use the word, not businesslike, more assertive in her approach to her work, even though her job is secondary. There is more importance to it, and I think she senses it. Maybe she's...
Explain, secondary to what?
Secondary to me.
Right.
I think she's become better in the working world, in the business person's world, than she was or would have been otherwise. At home, I have an interest that I pursue while I'm home. In fact, a few months ago, well, before the cancer thing set in, if you had given me my choice, I would have preferred to have worked at home doing what I'm doing now, but it doesn't seem to have the same flavor. So I'm still actively engaged in the attempt to generate some income from my home, but I do miss the business world. I guess I feel as though the situation has been forced on me, forced upon me, and just up until about a month ago, it was very difficult for me just to read. My attention span was very short, and my eyes would blur, and that was because of surgery and weakness and recuperating and all that. So as I get better, I seem to get, my interest is getting a little stronger, and maybe that will help balance out this power thing. I am aware that, as I said, that I have been short with her and not as attentive. And that is because I felt that I wasn't contributing anything. I mean, I wasn't the one who was getting up and going to work every day and going out there and meeting and greeting and fighting the world. So I didn't feel as though I was of much importance in that regard, that is making a salary, earning a salary. I'm making a salary now. My company is keeping me on salary. Well, I just went on long-term disability. But they kept me on salary the whole time up until long-term disability set in. So there's a difference between earning a salary and getting a salary. I was getting a salary, but I wasn't earning it. And that bothers me, not earning my money. Like John Hausman, we earn it, you know. I wasn't earning it.
Do you find it difficult to be taken care of?
Yes and no, you know. I like to be mothered, but I like it only when I want it. Otherwise, I would prefer just to be left alone. Like when I have the injection once a week. That really kind of lays me out for about 24 hours, and I just want to be left alone. So I can, yeah, either way, I like to be taken care of, but I also like to be left alone at certain times.
Janet, when we talked the first time, you'd mentioned that when you felt, you know, that Ed was going to die, that you thought maybe you'd want to die too. Have you felt any of that feeling since his illness has had these vicissitudes and he's felt at times that, or have you, do you feel those thoughts aren't part of your current thinking?
One time, not long ago, he'd just been in so much pain for so long, and he was getting really down, like he said, that I just got all depressed one evening, and I said, sometimes I think, why don't we just end it? And I think subconsciously I kind of did it on purpose because I wanted to snap him, and I wanted him to snap out of the way he was, and it worked. He got furious with me. How dare I say that sometimes, and then kind of gave the whole spiel he just gave a few minutes ago about someone should, what would be the purpose? Only to die to find out that maybe and never find out if I could have been cured or if this would get better. This is something you have to wait out, and it did. It kind of snapped him out of it, and I realized I really didn't mean it. I think I'd been trying to pull him out. I just felt him withdrawing, and I was very, very frustrated, and just irrational, emotional, and everything. Which
Your
is
usual
me.
self.
But no, I haven't felt that. That's where I really am getting a lot stronger. I think a lot about what would happen if he dies. And I will be very, 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 very lonely. But I'll be okay. And I don't think I'll have any kind of thoughts of not wanting to live. Because there really is a strong will to live in me, and I know that, so.
What are your greatest supports now? What do you feel helps you go on when the pain is great, when you feel, oh my gosh,
Trying to get normal. That's my biggest support right now.
Trying to get normal?
Trying to get normal. We actually left the house this past weekend. We went to Philadelphia to see some old friends. And with the exception of a trip to Braintree Mall, that is the second time we've been out in about 3 months, I guess. And it's those little excursions that make me want to come back. That remind me that fighting is important and that it can be fruitful. Otherwise, or in addition to that, I should say, Janet, makes me want to hang in there. And what I'm doing at home, the interest that I'm cultivating at home, also keeps me going. There aren't too many supports. Janet, trying to get normal, and doing what I'm doing at home to earn an income. Which is different than it was in the past. To support yourself in the past, not in terms of dollars and cents, of course, but to support yourself, you had to go out on Friday or Saturday night. You had to watch football games on. Isn't it wonderful? The strike. We are learning so much about ourselves as a result of this football strike. I don't need all of those. I don't need all that paraphernalia, all of that, all those cosmetics. Just a few things, a few good friends, and
It's so positive.